Welcome to the ROBOTalk podcast, your ultimate source for all things Robotech, anime, and more. Each week we dive into the world of anime, offering insights, interviews, and discussions about the classics and the modern hits. In this week's episode, we have an interview recorded in 2010 with our own Tom Bateman with actor Eddie Frierson, who is famous for his role as Lynn Kyle in Robotech and many other anime, as well as video games such as Medal of Honor and EverQuest. He also stars in his one-man show, MATTY, An Evening with Christy Matthewson, which is about a 20th century baseball player, Christy Matthewson. This will be playing in May and June in Santa Monica and has an off-Broadway revival this fall. Now sit back and enjoy this conversation with the entertaining and passionate Eddie Frierson. Let's jump into it.
So Eddie, how does a boy from Nashville get out to Hollywood?
Boy, you must have said Leroy. No, that's what I would say from Tennessee. You know what? It's funny. I played baseball, and so when I was trying to decide where to go to school, and who was showing interest in me as a ball player, I had narrowed it down to the University of Miami and UCLA. But once Gary Adams, who was the head coach at that time, was able to get me through admissions, it was a no-brainer because my sister played basketball at UCLA, and it's like, you kidding me? I can watch all of her games and play and go. UCLA is no big deal to people who live in Southern California, but it's a huge deal to people from Tennessee, let me tell you. So that's what did it, baseball.
Had you ever been out to California before?
Just to see her play. The couple of years before, I came out when she was in the basketball tournament, and they got upset by Cal State Fullerton in one of the late rounds before the national championship. And then my senior year in high school in 1978, it's hard to believe it's that long ago. That's just obscene to me, because I still feel like I'm 16. I had stayed in Nashville because we had won the state championship in baseball the year before. And the state champions from Pennsylvania were going to be coming down during spring break on their way through to play us. And that was when Diane, my sister, was in UCLA in '78, was making their great run for the national championship, which was being hosted and played in Pauley Pavilion that year. It was going to be a huge event, and they kept winning while I was at home by myself. My whole family was out here, and they ended up winning the national championship. Now, and this was before ESPN broadcast all the women's championships live and everything else. I couldn't even get scores off the AP wire by calling the Nashville, Tennessean newspaper, downtown. So knowing that I had missed that, and the day of the national championship actually was the day we were to play this team from Pennsylvania, and I went out to the ball field at Hillwood High School, and it started to rain. Not very hard, but then it got more steady, and then it started to thunder and lightning, and then it really came down, and the team from Pennsylvania never even showed up because it was pouring, and they were at the hotel, and why would they come? So that game was washed out, and I missed my sister winning the national championship for that. So to have the opportunity to not miss any more of her games, it was a no-brainer, and I came out here to play at UCLA.
So how did you do there in baseball?
I was mediocre. I mean, I thought I was a lot better than the coaching staff did. I was a guy who didn't throw the ball 95 miles an hour, but I could get it up there in the mid 80s. I was more what I thought was what you would know now as a Greg Maddux type, but a lot of movement on the ball and moved it in and out. And I thought I was a starting pitcher, but they saw me more as a short reliever, and it just didn't end up being a good role for me. And so as a player, I was not hugely successful on the diamond, but I learned stuff there, and actually it was the training grounds to turn me into a great coach. From UCLA, I ended up coaching at Santa Monica High School for 8 years until I got too busy doing the acting stuff. And in 4 years as head varsity coach there, just had a wonderful time and a lot of success. If you consider wins and losses success, very successful. But the thing I'm most proud of during my coaching years there is we had a 100% success ratio in getting every kid who played baseball at Santa Monica High who wanted to go to college got them in the college of their choice, whether it was Penn, George Washington, Oregon, Stanford, UCLA, wherever. And so that really was what made it ultimately even more fun for me. Not just that they were successful ball players, but that they all, moved on. And, I bumped into one at Dodger Stadium at the beginning of the year. Coach Ed! I couldn't believe it. Kid's coaching not coaching, he's teaching kindergarten now. And just having a great time. He's one of the great, apparently, young kid gurus in Southern California now. So that's kind of fun.
So how do you, when you go from being a headstrong player, coming right out of high school, you're the star of your team, and then you go to a team which is full of a bunch of high school stars, and when does that change that you decide, or the realization come that I'm better suited to being a coach than being a player? Well,
I wasn't even thinking of coaching. I always wanted to act, and it's always what I wanted to do. And so that was another reason to come to UCLA, and it's another reason why Miami was in the mix, because the University of Miami had a terrific theater program. But here I am, my freshman year, eventually 13 of those guys on that team were in the major leagues at the same time. And, so it was like, okay. Don Slott was my catcher. Mike Ago was at second base. Tim Leary and Dave Schmidt were on the team. Jimmy Otten set the NCAA record for home runs that freshman year. We were ranked number 1 the whole season, got beat by Cal State Fullerton in the regional final. Tim Wallach hit a 2-run homer off of Tim Leary to win the game 2-1. And, he went on to have a wonderful 15, 20-year major league career. I was not one of those guys, but it was really a tight family. I just used it, after playing for 2.5 years. I'm in my junior year, and had to sit down with Coach Adams. Because it didn't matter to me if I didn't play. It was a joy to be around these guys, this coaching staff. It was so positive. And I got to talking to him, and I said, Coach, I want to be a theater arts major, but I also want to play baseball. But if I play baseball, I got to be at class at 8 in the morning, got to be done by noon, got to be on the field from 1 to 7:30 at night. Then I'm going off to do rehearsals 7:30 to 11 every night, or shows or whatever. And and I can't take my major classes. I'm not going to be able to graduate as a theater major. What should I do? And he said, well, you can, maybe you should go and do your classes in your major. It's like, oh, okay. So you really don't have any plans for me in the program. Okay, that's cool. And so, together we made that decision. And I, my last year and a half, I totally concentrated on getting my degree in theater and gave up baseball. But it was fun. They kept me around. I umpired some JV games. I did, and always remained very close to the program, even though I didn't finish it out. But like I say, acting is what I always wanted to do. So being able to morph into that and really dive in, and there at UCLA, it was another all-star team of actors. So those relationships have been really terrific through the years too. Tim Robbins and you don't need to name drop, but it was a really good creative atmosphere to work in with a lot of good, talented people.
When did you first get the acting bug?
It's in the second grade. Mrs. Kramer's second grade class, we put on the Three Billy Goats Gruff, and I, of course, wanted to be the troll. But Scotty Etherly was the troll. I was the great big Billy Goat because I was always the big kid. And what's funny is my little guy just last year was great big Billy Goat in his second grade production of the Three Billy Goats Gruff. And from that's what started it. But the real thing that solidified it, when I was in the sixth grade, it was the first year of busing in Nashville, Tennessee, and my sixth grade teacher, Dan Easterly, who, shock of all shocks, I am very close with today. 30 some odd years later, he decided to put on a series of plays, but culminating with our class doing a production of West Side Story, in essence showing the city of Nashville that this whole busing brouhaha was no more than Romeo and Juliet, and that we're all the same, and how stupid this all is. And and it was such an experience for us. It was probably a really cruddy play, but I mean, production. It's hard to know. I mean, it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, we were all crying for real. I mean, it was so real for us putting on this show, whites against the blacks, as opposed to the Puerto Ricans against the Jets and Sharks. It was just and sixth graders having an interracial thing. I mean, all of it was really eye-opening and just so. It in a nutshell, it just was a great statement for the city at a very odd time, which shouldn't have been odd at all.
I mean, that's pretty bold. I mean, for sixth graders to deal with the social issues.
And let me tell you, it was quite something. I had not heard from him since 1973, the spring of 73, because it was 72 when we did that. May 1872, because I just, he and my buddy Howie and I, we have a conference call every year on May 18th, because that's the anniversary of it, because we, as little kids, it was really, it's a sentimental geek is me. But to now jump forward to 1996, and I'm doing a show off Broadway, and there being a note that comes backstage, and it opens up, and it calls me Ed. Go figure, because I'm not Ed to anybody. And it says, Ed, it has to be you, because there can't be any other Ed Frierson around. We come up here to New York a group of teachers and I come up here to do our Broadway series every year. I saw that you're doing this show, and we're all coming here tonight. Good luck, break a leg. Hadn't seen him, hadn't heard from him, and to have my sixth grade teacher in the audience, it was unbelievable. It was just incredible, and it rekindled friendship years later. And then you realize that he was only about 8 or 9 years older than the rest of us when we were in the sixth grade, and it's just kind of cool. Anyway, there you go. Long story for what should have been a short answer.
So moving on from UCLA and diving into the world of acting, what was your first experiences on that once you're jumping into the deep end of the pool?
Well, started right away doing theater and got into a repertory group called Theater Rapport, which essentially was bunch of kids getting together, and not all kids, but a fellow named Crane Jackson, who had a really abrasive personality, but somehow was able to bring a lot of talented people together. He put together actors, writers, and directors, and once a week we would do scenes and get criticism from them, but they were directed by people. Some of them were original writings and what have you. And then, as a repertory group, we also did plays. And I had been cast as Count Vronsky in a production of Anna K. or Anna Karenina. And it was just hard. To this day, it's the only bad review I've ever gotten. But the friendships that were made in that is my theater family to this day. There were 7 of us who became so tight. We actually called ourselves the family, started our own theater group. But one of those was one of my favorite people in the entire universe, and that's Lara Cody, who also is a tremendous voice actress. And we would do
baby talk backstage all the time. We would just do silly, stupid voices, right?
And we would laugh and giggle all the time backstage. And there was, I didn't realize, she told me she did cartoon voices. And I didn't realize that low-budget stuff, that the little studios in town, they work 24 hours. So if you don't have a lot of money, you'll have a 2 a.m. session and work 2 to 6. And she had, on this one night, she said, I got a 2 a.m. session. You want to come and see what I do? It's like, well, heck yeah, sure. Are you kidding me? So we went, and she's, doing all this stuff. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning, and the director was Ed Minix. Now, I don't know if you know that name. He passed away a number of years ago, but along with Bob Barron and the Carl Masiks and what have you, one of the terrific director writers, at least in my early days of anime and what have you. But he said, "You do this, don't you?" He had one of these gruff voices, kind of like Mahan, but Carrie Mahan, and like me, it's like, "Yeah, you kidding? Sure I do." And he says, well, that's why, I had a cancellation for this morning at 9 o'clock. I'm doing an Italian movie into English. And you'd be right for it. You want to do it? Because it'll save me, eating a studio pay. It's like, sure, dude. And I went and just happened to be good at it. Now, Lara was doing a cartoon. This was live action. And, for some reason, I was able to see that all you had to do was hit the plosives, all the M's, the B's, and the P's. And then it would look as good as it could that you were hitting it and saying it right. And there was this big breakdown scene where this kid, he's crying and going nuts for about, 5 solid minutes. And Ed thought it was going to take the whole day. He had a 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock session, and we were done by 10:30. A week later, he hired me for something else. And 2 weeks later, Bob Barron calls and said, Menix, tell me to call you. And from that to that to that to that to that, it just went from one thing to another to where then they said, we're doing this thing, Robotech. You're good for this one character. I mean, I don't even remember auditioning. I don't think I did. I think they just said, you're Kyle. And I didn't know it was Lynn Kyle. That was a weird thing to get past. Lynn Kyle. Why's he got a girl's name? Lynn's not a girl's name. It's Lynn Kyle. Just get over it. And so that was really the first experience of that. And I think it was about 1984 that we started recording the Robotechs. And then aired in 85, I think, is when it all hit the airwaves. And at the time, they were telling us this was groundbreaking, and it's the first anime thing, first thing from Japan that's going to be actually on every day. And, I could have cared less being a, 24-year-old kid. It's just like, how, $20 an hour? Are you kidding me? Whoa, dude, awesome. So, we didn't know at the time how big it was going to be, and we certainly didn't appreciate how good it was. It was just fun to do. And it wasn't then again until a few years after that, after recording all of that I even got to know a lot of the other people who were in it, because you just go in and do your voice, and that would be the end of it. But right out of UCLA, that little theater rapport, Lara, Cody, and I owe Lara and that night of asking me to come and see what I do for my entire career in the voiceover world. And, all the success I enjoy to this day. She's still a very dear, close friend.
Eddie, when you read the scripts for Lynn Kyle and Robotech, did you realize, what his political positions were? No, I mean, not just, we just got it, and there it was. And it's really kind of funny because there was no reading the scripts. It was reading your lines. They had it broken down into specific cues with time code, and they just rolled it, and you tried to hit the sync, and many times it would be, it'd be Bob Barron in the other room just saying, no, this is what he's trying to say. And he would give you the background then. It's like, oh, okay, that changes the line reading. Okay, boom, and then you do it again. But it really, I wish that I could say that it was this great total understanding of the character, that I knew what he was doing and where he was going, but it was a week-to-week thing. Whenever I got called in, it's like, he's dating his cousin now? What? Are you kidding me? So I had no idea what was going on until I actually came in and just laid down the lines. It wasn't even look over it really and get a sense of what was going on, because you didn't have everybody else's dialogue. And many times I would be the first or the second person to record, so none of the other stuff was recorded, so we didn't have anything to bounce off of. So I really had to rely on whoever was directing the session to make sure that Kyle's, the way that the line was delivered would make sense for the way that they were going to get whoever it was to respond to it. Did the director actually read the opposite line?
No, not at all. I mean, that's just not the way it was done back then. Now it's really funny because it wasn't too far after the Robotech stuff started that they got into what we call the 3 beeps. Where the tape will roll and goes boop, 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 and on the imaginary 4th beep is when your line starts. That's when it locks into record, and they have it perfectly synced up now to when the mouth opens and you're going. But when we were doing Robotech, it was 03, 29, and 14 frames. and it was out at 03, 31, and 2 frames. And you had those time codes there. But it was a skill. I'm telling you what, and it's probably why I got to work so much, and why all of us involved with Robotech did, because we kind of learned doing the foreign movies into English and watching time code and being really good at sync. Actually putting the words in the mouth when the mouth is open and hitting the closed mouth when the mouth is closed, and so it became a real skill to actually just look at the time code. Try to memorize the line in your head, a second before you went, and there were no beeps. You just had to do it. And I got to where I didn't even watch the time code. I would just watch the mouth and just and put it in there that way. And, it got to be comical sometimes. You really screw it up, and it's like, yeah. And right then at the beginning, it wasn't digital. It was on tape. So they're having to cut tape, and that is a whole insane different, editing then was a much tougher ball game than it was just a couple of years later when, it wasn't really until it got into the late 80s that they started doing computerized and all that stuff, and how far it's come now is just absurdly easy. I mean, you'll record something, he'll go, we will win, and the mouth is completely wrong, and they'll go, no, it's not a problem, we can fix that. And they just slide it back, or they can take the section of the "w" and put it when the mouth is going "w." And for me, it's like, can't I just do it again? Because I guess it's, even though I don't feel like I'm old school, I guess that is old school. So it drives me crazy when sync is not perfect now. But no, I didn't know what his political views were at all, to really answer the question. And they seem to change, on a daily basis with his bizarre personality and the different layers that were given to his character, from promoting his cousin to dating her to abusing her to being against the military establishment. All that stuff would just come on. And I think if you go back and you look at early episodes, you won't have those layers in Lynn Kyle, because I didn't have a clue that they existed, and I don't think the writers did either. They were translating and writing episodes as we went along, so they didn't have the 26 episode picture. They had the first 6, and then they were going to get the next 6, and different people were writing them. And so I'm sure that they had their story sessions. You guys probably know better than I do. But I don't think, when Lynn Kyle first popped on the scene, they had any idea he was going to be a movie star down here toward the end. And there's no way. But my favorite scene ever still, as Lynn Kyle, and I laughed and laughed and laughed, because it was really, it may or may not be true, but it's my first memory of him being the jerk, is when he walks in and he takes the glass of wine and he throws it in. I can still remember, throwing the glass of wine in Min May's face and go, "Pretty, isn't it?" or whatever the line was. It was like, acting like a child or whatever it was. But I can still, even if those aren't the right words, that's what I remember. It's like, "Pretty, isn't it?"
This is how a professional acts.
That's what it is. Okay, yeah. So, but that's the same feeling. It's like, you know what? That to me was the most fun single scene ever for Lynn Kyle. For me, it was just like, oh, this guy's a piece of work. I thought he was like, a really hip up there dude. Mm-hmm. So
when you see a scene like that, especially like in a cartoon, that kind of stands out from the regular fare that you're normally used to.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on from Robotech, where did you go from there?
Well, you know what? It's really the kind of thing where it just bounced from one project to the next, and there was a lot of Robotech was recorded. Obviously, Harmony Gold was involved, but it was recorded at a place called Inner Sound, and that was the house, using the biz lingo, where we did so much of this stuff back then, and they had tons of projects coming in all the time, and then they got to be so successful they started doing multi-language stuff, and then that started taking over the English stuff because it was bringing in more. So really it was bouncing one thing after another there at Inner Sound. And, at the time I was coaching baseball at Santa Monica High and was really busy. So whenever they called and said, "Hey, we got 2 hours for you," and I'm going, awesome, that's $40, no way. It was fun it was just fun to go down and do it. I didn't consider it as a job or anything. I mean, it was refereeing volleyball, which was, bringing in my rent money. So doing the anime stuff was a way to act and keep in it, and what I thought was being paid well at the time, being a kid, basically just, your early days of trying to work and be on your own. And it just went one thing to another, to another, to another. But it was when Lara, Cody, and Cam Clark got together. It was 1987, I think it was, where a group of people that they knew were doing what they called looping, ADR, automated dialogue replacement, on a movie called Lucas, which was a high school movie starring Corey Haim, who just passed away recently. And they needed high school voices, dude. And so they suggested me. I was hired on with them to do this group ADR on this movie. And it was great fun, a tremendous blast. There's a lot of football stuff in it. And since most actors aren't athletes, I mean, I hate to be general on that, but so there was a lot of blue 43, blue 40 goes. I was doing all the techno stuff for the football practice and the games and all stuff, and getting them to yell the right stuff and not be idiots and what have you. And it's funny because Charlie Sheen was in this movie, and I just coached him at Santa Monica High his senior year, which was my first year out of UCLA. And so it's funny, I used to call him Sport. So there's one scene where a blender blows up in Lucas's face, or blows up in Charlie Sheen's face, and you'll hear me in the background go, "Way to go, Sport," which was my way of being funny, on an inside joke.
So how good of a baseball player was Charlie Sheen?
Charlie was really good. In fact, he killed us because his senior year, he was starting second baseman, and the best relief pitcher that we had. He could have been a starting pitcher. I mean, he threw the ball really well, and he was smart. But he was the guy that we would go to if somebody got in trouble, who could come in and just, blow people away and just mix it up. And the team was really good his senior year. But what we didn't realize was that he had his 18th birthday. You'd have to look up what his real birthday is, but it seems like January or February of that year. And Dad got him a truck or a car. Got him a car of some kind. And what we didn't realize, because he came to practice every day, was that he had stopped going to school every day. So when the baseball playoffs happened, of course, CIF, the governing body for athletics in Southern California, they do their basic check to make sure that everybody is eligible, and Charlie was no longer eligible to play high school athletics. So he had to be in street clothes on the bench, and the game got in trouble. I'm trying to remember if we lost 2-1 in the first round, got guys on base, and didn't have him to go to put out the fire, and I think if you were to find him, he would tell you that he cost his high school team their chance in the playoffs his senior year. But he was a good kid, and not nearly so. My experience with him was not. He wasn't the wild child that he became. Just always very fun, respectful, hardworking, and a good ball player. So it was really funny when he did Major League and became Wild Thing, that he actually was a better player than he looked like on that, his form and everything else, because the way they shoot everything and make him throw, pitches here, there, and everywhere, just for camera angles and everything, he actually has a lot better form than he had in that movie. And as a baseball guy, baseball in the movies, it drives me crazy when it's not perfect.
So when you see him, you're saying, "Why are you throwing it like that?"
No, not at all. Because I know how stuff works, and they're saying be the character and all this stuff. So he's trying to be Mitch Williams, the Wild Thing, for the Philadelphia Phillies. So it's I understand that. That's cool. So, but a good ball player. Well. So now I'm saying I'll go back to where they're trying to form the group. And so Lara and Cam formed a group that they cleverly named Loop Therapy. So, and, I just started working for them. And again, it's like I was really busy. I had to be free every afternoon to coach at the high school, which that job just kind of, the baseball coaching just kind of fell in because I used to just go up to Santa Monica High and throw with my friend Howie on the weekends just to stay in shape. And one Sunday we were up there, and all these kids came out of the woodwork, and they're going to play a game, and they were short some people, and they say, "Hey, dude, do you pitch?" And it's like, "Well, yeah." Well, I didn't realize, it's Charlie, people like that who were there playing, and I could have cared less who he was, didn't know, didn't care, and he'll always be Charles Estevez to me, anyway. But we played, had a great time. They say, "Hey, we are out here every Sunday afternoon if you want to come and play any other time." And there was a dad there, and I don't know who it was. It might have been Martin Sheen for all I know. I mean, I just don't remember. Couldn't have cared less. But I said, "Hey, do you know they need any help here at the high school? Because I'd love to help out. I'm just doing my, hey, I'll help." And a couple of months later, Don Seeley, who was the head coach, unexpectedly had a heart attack. He was only 42 years old and died. And I got called by Jose Lopez, a fellow who had been given the team, and he said, the parents said that you're a good guy, and would you like to coach the Frosh Soft team? Because we don't have anybody. It's like, well, sure. You'll be a walk-on coach, and there's not much pay. And it's like, sure. And just had a blast doing it. And from there, moved up to the varsity, and just had a great time. But anyway, they would throw me. Lara and Cam would throw me the jobs here and there, and whenever they could. And then you're meeting people off of that who are then hiring you for other jobs. And then it ended up being, well, you're really good at this. We want you around. And I had the young voice, the Kyle voice. And so it was pretty much on every high school stuff that there ever was, to the point where if you had ever called my answering machine way back then, it was, "Hi, you've reached Eddie Frierson." I tried to do this silly old voice because everybody thought I was this, because that's the way I talked. And so it's funny because I got some of those old recordings and they just crack you up, me trying to be macho. But you do enough screaming on Indian, cowboy and Indian movies, and, your voice naturally lowers a little bit. So I just started working a lot, and it got to the point where, in my fourth year as a head coach at Santa Monica High, it didn't make any sense to keep doing it because it's, I was having to show up to practice late, and I had great help, good assistant coaches, a guy named Ben Dudley who was, just fantastic. But it was like either I'm going to start turning down jobs and real money, for the sake of 12 cents an hour, to coach at the high school, or I need to not be unfair to these kids, and they need to have somebody who's not going to be late ever again. And so I stepped down there, and I miss it. But now that I'm coaching my own kids, it's almost like, just getting right back on the horse and having a blast. So, but like I say, it's still funny to go to UCLA games and have kids, or this year at Dodger Stadium, have one of my kids recognize me and say, "Hey, Coach Ed!" It's really funny because it's been, 20 years almost since I've been there.
You've been listening to the RoboTalk podcast produced by All Pop No Culture. This show is entirely crowdfunded by our Patreon site, patreon.com/RoboTalk. Supporting us there not only helps us improve the quality of the show, but also allows us to bring in special guests for interviews, discussions, and more. Take a look at the Patreon page and sign up to support all of the great content we have planned. And now, back to the interview.
All right, Eddie is a baseball player and a coach, and now an actor. When you see baseball movies, what's the first thing that you think of?
Well, how lame they are. No. It's, what's really, it'll drive anybody. I think it happens with anybody watching a movie where their supposed or self-thought area of expertise is. It drives you crazy when it's not perfect. So So I look at baseball movies like, oh, gee, come on. Do we really have to have at the major league level another montage of the ball hitting a guy in the groin? It just doesn't happen. It does not happen. Drives me insane. It's like, I don't care. The worst team is made of the best players in the entire world. It's just, it's funny. Bob Costas explained it to me one time. He said, look, if you take the worst team, which that year was the Kansas City Royals, and you take the best team, which is the New York Yankees, and every series throughout the season was just those two teams, and it was a World Series. It was the best out of 7. And every one of those series went to the 7th game. So that's pretty close, right? But the Yankees win Game 7 every time. The Yankees are in first place, and the Royals are 30 games out. And that's the difference between the best team in the major leagues and the worst team. It's just Game 7. So when you see, for me, when I see, bad ball playing or the guy who makes the stupid throw and looks like he's a 12-year-old, and I've seen some 12-year-olds who can really throw well, it drives you nuts. But my best example of the best and the worst, and one's a friend and one's one I don't know, but you take the movie Bull Durham, and you've got the best in that. Kevin Costner in Bull Durham is the best baseball player on film. Strike 3 and he instantly whips the ball down to third base. It's just, everything about the way that he walks, talks, throws the ball, everything in that movie is a real ball player. Every essence of it is just great. Same movie. Tim Robbins went to school with him at UCLA, and they just, and now here's the thing. Tim's a pretty good player because, he played on the intramural softball team, could throw a ball pretty well. But as a pitcher, no. I mean, if he had been trying to pull off third base or something else, he probably would have looked great. But just, everything from the absurdity of, the ball going and flying off here and hitting a mascot to anything else. And a lot of that's in the script, so it's not his fault. But you've got this stud pitcher who's just doesn't look like a stud throwing to a stud catcher who really does look like a stud, and just that kind of stuff, bothers me. But I think that, whereas you can jump forward to the movie The Rookie, where Dennis Quaid, not really a ball player, but the way that they edited that, there's only one throw in that where he doesn't look like a complete stud. And the reason is because they got, they cut to him tight, and then they go wide, and you see, this left-handed guy throwing. You've got the ball going boom in the thing. And you never really see the release of the ball except like one time where it doesn't look good. And so all of his stuff in the bullpen really looks like he can pitch. So, that's an example of really good editing to make not major league talent look a lot better. So it's just it's that kind of stuff. But really, the thing that drives me the most crazy in baseball movies is this need to throw in some kind of comedy. Whereas can't if a team is doing bad, can't they just boot the ball? Can't they just make a legitimate error where it kicks off the heel of the glove and goes to the side, and they, pick him up and the guy's safe by half a step? Do they really have to have, oh my goodness, fall down on their face and look like complete clowns? It just drives me nuts. But I'm sure if there's a movie about gymnastics, that'll drive gymnasts nuts, and I'm sure that, anything that you guys do that you love, it just makes you crazy when it's totally off base. But by the way, in The Rookie, go ahead when he's loosening up in Durham and just listen, because when he's loosening up in the bullpen in Durham, you will hear very distinctly, "Your attention, please. Now batting for the Bulls, number 38, Eddie Frierson." And that is fun. And the reason that came about was, I always go through, I've kind of become, it's really funny because I'm the sports guy, but I'm also the actor man. I've become in a lot of the post-production circles as the go-to guy for any play-by-play, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, hockey, lacrosse, field hockey, whatever, because they know that I can just come in and make it up and sound like, the guy on the bay, winds, delivers, fly ball into right field, do all that stuff, right? So I was asked on The Rookie to just, lay down some stuff names, people coming up to bat, whatever. And I always do. It's really funny because when I'm doing a basketball game, since I told you about my sister, it is always the 1978 UCLA Bruin women's team against the 1951 Rochester Royals, because my Uncle Bob Davies, who's a basketball Hall of Famer and invented, was the first to ever go behind his back, the behind-the-back dribble and pass. I always play those two teams against each other because people don't know those names, but I do, and it's really easy to keep in track in my head as I'm making up who's on offense, who's on defense, and I know their positions and everything else, so that's a real easy thing for me to make up. So it's all basketball is always 78 UCLA women, 51 Rochester Royals, because that was a year my Uncle Bob was MVP of the NBA. And in football, baseball, I just do a combination of brothers-in-law and high school friends. So you keep the family separate, and again, it's really easy to, when it's a pass across the middle, he's drilled by Big John Fowler, my brother-in-law who played football at UCLA, and it's just really easy to do. So I'm doing my usual, next up for the Bulls, number 16, John Fowler, and it's always the pitcher is Pat Patterson, who was my other brother-in-law, who was a quarterback at University of Louisville. He's always the quarterback on a football team. And they're like, and the post-production people are like, who are these people? I'm like, well, they're family, they're friends. And it's like, oh, we don't have clearance for those names. It's like, my goodness, they're just names. It doesn't, I could say, Javier Bolivskaba, and, somebody might be named that in the world. It doesn't really matter, so, and they're really anxious. I don't know what to do. What do we do? Can't you just say, now batting number 16? It's like, well, that's stupid. I said, here's one that's clear. Your attention, please. Now batting number 38, Eddie Frierson. And who could know that they would? I mean, it's dialed up loud. You'll crack up when you watch it because it's like there, big time. And I got so many backwards friends from Tennessee. I got phone calls. Dude, I didn't know you played minor league ball. Oh, hold it. No, they talked the other way. Those are my California friends. Hey, dude, I didn't know you played minor league ball. That's awesome. So, again, a long answer to your very succinct question. Bad baseball makes me crazy, but Kevin Costner was the best. Oh, I do have a story about Field of Dreams, though. I had just started my research on Christy Matthewson, had just done my first ever performance of it way back when. My dad found the book Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella, and I read it and just went, this is incredible. And I instantly, not knowing what to do, I was just a kid, and I said, I called the publisher, and I got the right person, and I said, look, I want to buy the rights to this book. I'm thinking it'll cost $200. And it's like, no, it's already been sold. It's like, oh, well, that bites, because I'm thinking they won't do it right. Just what we've just been talking about. It's going to really stink, And then the auditions were happening. Phil Robinson, who wrote it and directed it.
Robinson.
Yeah, Phil Robinson. Just a really nice guy. I go in and I read, and then I'm called back to the producer callback, and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to wear my uniform. I got a 1910. My sister made a 1910 era Christy Matthewson New York Giants baseball uniform, and since I was really reading for one of the old ball players, I thought it'd be perfect. I'll just go in and I'll do that. So I went in, and Phil is there with his pencil, and there's like a couple of 20-something girls. Don't know why they're there, and one other person I can't. Don't whatever. And so I read it. I read my thing, and I wish you could see it on the radio, but so Phil, he's smiling the whole way through it, and I'm thinking, man, I'm just nailing this left and right. It's pretty awesome, and he looks over to his left with his hands up. He's got a pencil in his hand. He's like, big smile, with a look on his face, like, so what do you think? And the 20-something girl has this kind of scrunched up look on her face, like, and he goes, what? Because apparently, I guess they'd been having, trouble. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? He just doesn't look like a ball player. And he threw his pencil in the air. And I'm dressed up in the old uniform, It's like, and I said, well, what what is it? It's like, well, it doesn't fit. It's like, oh my gosh, this person whoever this person is, doesn't have a clue. I said, well, hold it though. Do you know that and I already know I don't have the part. There's no way that I can get the part now. And I'm not trying to be, abrasive or anything, but I say, but you know that these are, these are real guys. And she goes, oh no, this is a fiction. And he just expels and puts his head down on the table. And I said, well, I said, I know I'm not going to get this, but no. I mean, Joe Jackson, Buck Weaver, Chick Gandil, Hap Felsch, all these guys. I mean, they were real players on the best team that had ever been assembled. Many felt at that time, the 1919 White Sox. And I mean, I think I look like any one of them, but. If you don't have pictures of them, I'll bring them back. I'll bring you pictures so that it can help you in your casting. And she's like, oh, no, it's okay. Thank you so much. Da-da-da. And I left. But I couldn't stand it because this book had meant so much to me when I read it right when it came out. And so, of course, I went home and I went and I made copies of all the pictures of their players with bios. And I took it back that same day and, knocked on the door after one actor came out and said, don't mean to bother you, but I just wanted to give you a pack of pictures of the actual ball players. And I give it to her. He says, thank you so much. And now he may have thought that I was a jerk too or whatever. But anyway, I just felt good because I went, I've done my part to maybe save this movie. And, of course, when it came out, you got the people the movie was great. It was very true to the book and couldn't have been happier the way that it turned out. But I went, okay, well, the folks that they cast in the parts that I was trying, okay, well, they went with Art LaFleur, who's a terrific actor, but they went for like an old, tobacco spitting stereotype, and that's okay. He was terrific, but it wasn't these ball players in their prime, which is how I would have cast it. I would have cast it as they were right when they were thrown out of baseball. So that's my one Hollywood story of like, I just can't believe it, but I still felt like even though I know really I didn't have anything to do with it, I feel like maybe I had something to do with the movie coming out okay. It's funny that the whole anime early days thing had such an impact on my life, but the biggest one, and who would have ever guessed it? That very first movie that I did the ADR work on, that Cam Clark was on and Lara Cody was on. And I can still remember on Lucas, Cam and I screaming during the football games, we're animals! And now, to this day, whenever we're on a job together, if we can get, you're an animal or we're animals somewhere in it, we'll do it. To where it's kind of become an inside joke. But we started working together a lot. And, for those of you who don't know, Cam Clark is one of the King family. The singers, and just a wonderful family, and they had their own television show through the 60s and early 70s where, it was either right before or right after Lawrence Welk. I can't remember, but I can remember as a kid, it was before the Flintstones and on Saturday nights. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is baby Cam, and now he's my buddy. But we were doing, Cam and Lara had, their group was doing all the post-production voice stuff for Doogie Howser, MD, and I was working on one of those shows one day in the basement of their ADR stage was underneath the screening theater at 20th Century Fox, way back in the back corner. And we were downstairs one day, and after it was over, this is 1992, I guess, and Cam is just sitting there afterwards, and he's writing something on a piece of paper, and he goes, hey, do you mind if I set you up with somebody? And it's like, well, and I'm constantly joking with Cam because his answering machine goes just like this. Hi, this is Cam. Leave a message. And I can do it exactly like him. And so we laugh and joke. And I go, you Cam? Sure. Introduce me to anybody. And he says, well, here, take this number. On a piece of paper, and because you are so white bread, and this girl is my best friend, and she's the most white bread person that I know besides you, and I think that you'll just get along together. So, that was 18 years ago, and we've been married for 15 years and have 3 great kids, and that was the lovely and talented Natalie Beck that he wrote on that piece of paper with her phone number way back when. And it's just funny that if I wasn't in that theater group with Lara all those years ago and didn't go with her to that 2 a.m. session to see what I do, and didn't work on the movie with Cam and get to be friends with him, I mean, I wouldn't have what I have today. I'd still be living in a 10 by 12 room down on the beach and coaching baseball. So, I'll always be thankful to him for that. But it's really funny because Natalie and her boyfriend, Cam, go out on regular dates together. She goes, I'm going on a date with my boyfriend tonight. And I laugh, and I go, yeah, go ahead, whatever. But they have an affinity for horror movies where I have an affinity for baseball movies. And, it's like, hey, you gave her to me. You can take her one night every couple of months. It's okay.
Hollywood's had a long love affair with baseball. What are some other examples where you think, and why do you think that is?
Well, I just think, that the human element of it is just so grand, and that baseball, from all the cliches that go along with it, it really is true. It's a father and son game. It's passed down from generation to generation. Just the love of the game. Everything from teaching your kid how to keep a scorecard to the other drama, like Lou Gehrig being on top of the world, and suddenly, a year and a half later, he's dead from a disease that now bears his name. That the human element and the drama of baseball, and that having a clock on a game to where, I mean, it's just really funny. Just this last week, and I don't know when this is going to officially air, but I grew up, got my first transistor radio when I was 3 years old, and I'm 3 years old in the 3rd grade. Is what I meant to say. And I used to listen to the only games I could get on it were Atlanta Braves games in the 70s, and they were always in last place, but they had the best lineup in baseball. They had Joe Torre, Rico Cardi, Henry Aaron, Ralph Garr. The one no-name on the lineup was Felix Millan, played second base. They had Dusty Baker in the outfield, Davy Johnson. I mean, they just could hammer the ball, but they had no pitching. So I became an Atlanta Braves fan at a very young age, and they always stunk my whole life. So their success over the last 15, 20 years is, I was allowed to be a fan and not jumping on the bandwagon when they had their run of 14 straight playoffs seasons. But just this last week, the Atlanta Braves are playing a game, and they're down 9-3 in the last inning, and it's over. And, they get a couple of guys on base, and a couple more guys on base, and they score a couple of runs. Now it's a bases loaded, and the score is 9-6, and they're bringing up a pinch hitter, a guy, I can't even remember his name, but it's nobody I've ever heard of before. And, he hits a routine fly ball. He's rounding first base. They're showing him. He rounds first base. He grabs his head, and he jumps up and down. Doggone it, because the guy caught the ball. But he didn't catch the ball. It went off his glove, out of the park, grand slam home run, Braves win. He's turning and walking back towards the bench when he sees everybody emptying the bench, and the fans are going nuts, and he turns around, what? And then does his sprint around the bases, and is just totally mobbed at home plate. Now, this is just last week with a total no-name, and I got so excited, I had to show the kids on the internet. I said, you got to see this. This is unbelievable, and there's just all that drama in baseball, and so not just the people and the characters that are involved, but everything. It ties you to a certain year, 1941, the year that Joe DiMaggio hit in 56 straight games, but it's also the last year that a man batted 400, Ted Williams. 1961 when Roger Maris hit 61 home runs. I mean, it sucks you into an era, and the World Series puts you in a point in time that everybody can remember. At a point in their childhood or later, if you were old enough in 1989, you remember the earthquake in the World Series, and the fact that it was Oakland against San Francisco, and the earthquake it affects both teams and both towns, and or 9/11 happens and they just stop baseball for a couple of weeks, just stop it. And then it's decided, they were going to call off the rest of the season and the World Series. It's like, no, let's go ahead and do it. And then for New York to be in the World Series in 2001, the way that baseball helped heal a city that could not be healed at the time, it was just a month later, a month and a half later, and but to have the president go out there, whether you like him or not, throwing out the first pitch in that city, and the whole city in New York saying "stick it" to the rest of the world, screaming their lungs out. I mean, it was a moment in time that, for this horrible period of our time, is one of the lasting moments that I'll ever have. The very next season in 2002. Major League Baseball decided that the California Angels were going to start the baseball season. It's always been the Cincinnati Reds, but it's going to be the California Angels because Chick Burlingame, who was the pilot of the plane that went into the Pentagon, was a tremendous baseball fan, an Angels fan, grew up in Orange County in Anaheim. His brother Brad, I did a play with years ago. He's now in charge of all of the promo for the city of West Hollywood, just a grand guy. And Chick he left his wife and his daughter in D.C. His birthday was September 12th. He was going to fly out here as a treat to himself. He got the flight. He was going to go to an Angels game with Brad, his sister, Brad and his sister and his other brother. But of course, the plane went down. So the Angels, knowing this story, they called up Brad and said, "Brad, we wanted to do something special for your brother, but we need you to be involved." And he's like, "Yeah, anything, guys. What?" He says, "We want you to throw out the first pitch." And he's just completely taken aback. It's like, "You're kidding me. Awesome." And the first pitch on opening day, and they said, "It's not just opening day. It is the first pitch for baseball for the whole season. You're going to throw it out." And then for the Angels to have their run and to make the playoffs and then to win the World Series. And if nobody else knew that whole season's human drama, which most people didn't, the people who knew, just even if it just affected that family the way that it did, to feel like they really did have an angel in the outfield, and that season had something to do with all of that and helped with that healing process as well. So there's just so much, and you can find it's not just in baseball. You can find human drama and things that are meaningful in any one of a number of things. But baseball, because there's no clock and because so many different microcosms of it can be metaphors for life. Everything from, the umpires that in your everyday life to, throw your best pitch in a pinch. Come on, why would you throw your worst pitch in a pinch? And, hey, don't forget to touch second when you're going out the door. Just all those little things that have become so much a fabric of our being when people don't even know or care about baseball, that it just has... It just inherently is drawn to the human and the dramatic element of the human existence.
A big part of your passion, as far as for acting and also for baseball, is brought together in your show, Christy. Tell us more about that.
Well, it's really funny. It's called MATTY, but it's about
God.
No. That's okay. It's okay because it's about Christy, and it's a natural. It could be called Christy, it could be called MATTY, it could be called anything. But the important thing is that it's about this very special man. When I first got out of UCLA, like all young actors, you're looking for something that's going to be like your vehicle for fame, dude. And I hate to keep putting on my surfer. There's a lot of very smart surfer dudes, so no offense, but I really did kind of talk like that back then. And it's like, well, what am I going to do? And I'm doing all the right things. I'm getting in a theater group. I'm meeting Lara. I'm doing all this stuff. But my dad, who was an educator, found a copy of a book that Christy Matthewson, the great Hall of Fame pitcher, wrote back in 1912 called Pitching in a Pinch. And he found it, for like $6, and a pristine copy is probably worth $2,000. in an old bookstore in San Diego, and he gave it to me, and I stuck it on my shelf and just left it there for a couple of years. And during the '84 Olympics, see, I'm dating myself now, aren't I? But this is before Robotech. It's actually right about the same time that all that was starting. I had been asked to call lines, in a sense, referee the Olympic volleyball. Pardon me. The Olympic volleyball competition. It was happening in Long Beach. It's like, at that point in time, even though I was a kid, I had already refereed like the best in the world. It didn't really mean anything to me. I already knew the Chinese, the Russians, the Italians, Brazilians, big whoop that it was the Olympics, because I was young and stupid and, didn't realize that it really was a big deal. And I thought, it's going to be a zoo here in Los Angeles. I'm going to go to our family reunion on the beach in Florida that we have every year. And as I was leaving my 10 by 12 room on the beach, when I need something to read, and that was just the book that I grabbed. And I started cracking up on the airplane reading these stories and going, oh, man, this guy was my size. He invented what he called the fadeaway, but it was the modern-day screwball that nobody can really throw because it kills your arm. Like the last guy to throw it successfully was Fernando Valenzuela. It's like, I dabbled with that, and he's a pitcher, and he's smart, and these characters, these stories are kind of a crack up. I bet I could make something out of this book. And I got down on the beach, and I'm telling my dad about it. I said, this book you found me, I finally read it. It's really kind of great. And he goes, well, where's he from? And I go, some Factoryville, Pennsylvania. It's like, well, where's that? It's like, I don't know. It's like, well, let's go down to the AAA here in Pompano Beach, tomorrow. Let's get a map and we'll see. So we pull open a map and we look, and Factoryville's right to the northwest of Scranton, Pennsylvania, in the northeast corner of the state, and right to the right of that is Honesdale, Pennsylvania. He goes, little Walter B. lives in Honesdale. Walter B. being Walter Barb, who was my dad's advisor when he got his PhD at Kent State, and was then the editor-in-chief for Highlights for Children, which was published in Honesdale, Pennsylvania, a little dot on the map. He says, why don't you, when we get back to Nashville, you hop in the car, you drive up there, see if anybody's alive. You could stay with Walter B. for a couple of days and just, go see. And I'm like thinking, my dad's way out of the box for me. I never would have thought I'd do. Excellent. Yeah, cool. So I hopped in the car and I drove. And I mean, it's a 2-hour story in and of itself, but it became that very first night. The first place I pulled into was Bucknell University in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, because it was the first stop on the journey. And that night, I stayed at the Lewisburger hotel, which is now the Lewis. It's been restored to its former grandeur of the 1800s, and it's the Lewisburg Hotel. It was $14 a night with a light bulb hanging on a string, and that's the only night in. Now that's 1984. You're talking about 26 years that I've ever spent. That I ever had to paid for a hotel room to deal with this Christy Matthewson fellow. The next night I was in Factoryville, Pennsylvania, his hometown. The lady, Mrs. Gardner, who ran the hotel, would not let me pay, wanted me to stay another night, and as she's introducing me to people that she knows. When I got up to the Hall of Fame, they already knew that I was coming. I don't know how. They had the box out on the table. You must be Frierson. I got the Matthewson stuff right here. Going up to Saranac Lake where he died. I mean, and I found out very early that this project was not about this book, and it sure wasn't about me. 1 week into it, I could have cared less, and still do, whether anybody know who I am or that I created this show. This guy was special. He was very different. He was best friends with presidents. He was the most popular person in the world. He wrote a Broadway play, a whole series of books for boys. Incredibly brilliant. He was the world's checkers champion. Go figure on that one. And was so much more than a baseball player, and was used by the press at the time to turn baseball from this rowdy game where the gamblers came and just, bet money and all that stuff, to a game where women and children could come because the college boy played. And I don't get into any of that stuff, as you know, in the play. It really is just an evening with Christy Matthewson, just telling some stories and anecdotes, that anyone, I think, can relate to in their own lives, that we all, as human beings, have the same experiences. We know the same kinds of people. We have the same ups and downs. The only thing that's different is that you're working in internet radio and I'm doing voices on a TV show. But the fact that, and again, at baseball, I mean, using baseball to tie all of that together. And so as I started to find out more about him and then was able to put the show together, then for it to be such a huge success and a critical success that I never dreamed in a million years, that people love this man as much as I do. That's been the most rewarding thing for me in my professional life, and now it's been more than half of my life that I've been involved with Christy Matthewson. And having in that early process, I'm so thankful that I met people who were alive as children and knew him as children. They've now since passed, and now through them I'm able to carry on a really what I've been told is, or at least by them, a very true and accurate memory that they have of Uncle Christy, most of them called him. And that to me is really fulfilling. And every night that I'm able to go and do that, it gets all the fireworks blasting out of my head because it's so much fun. And I'm going to actually be doing it again on June 6th at the Canyon Theater Guild up here in Newhall in Santa Clarita as a benefit for a scholarship fund for the Patricia Hayes Scholarship Fund.
Eddie, why do you think Christy Matthewson is important? What do you want people to get out of that show? And what do you think Christy Matthewson would say about the state of baseball today?
Well, I think he would be disappointed with all the allegations of steroid use and things like that. But I think he also would understand the situation that the game was in during the last 15 years, where ownership looked the other way. And that would have disgusted him more than the players actually doing it. Because when he played, baseball was run by the owners, and they made a complete, shambles of it. In fact, created the circumstances that led to the throwing of the World Series in 1919 by the Chicago White Sox. Because these aren't Matthewson's words, but in my words, the owners were pigs back then. The reserve clause in everyone's contract, which existed until Curt Flood broke it in the early 70s, which created free agency, made you the personal property of the team that signed you, and you had to take what deal they gave you or not play. You had no right to negotiate. The only thing that you could do was sit out for the season. And a fellow named Amos Russi, the Hoosier Thunderbolt, one of the greatest pitchers of the 1890s, actually did that, sat out for 2 years and to get more money, and has become one of the great trivia questions of all time. What's the worst trade in the history of big league baseball? And that was the New York Giants trading Amos Russi to the Cincinnati Reds to acquire Christy Matthewson. Amos Russi never pitched another game, and Christy won 373. But ownership at the time allowed that to happen. Christy Matthewson, along with some others, John Montgomery Ward of Montgomery Ward Stores, A.G. Spalding of Spalding Sporting Goods, tried to create a coalition of ball players where they would have some negotiating power and would be able to sell their services for greater gain. But it always was slammed because the baseball owners just had such a powerful monopoly on that. When the current set of owners, and again, this is my opinion, but a lot of real baseball historians feel this way. When they decided that Fay Vincent, who was a commissioner of baseball, who was a good man and a real, true, solid, traditional baseball man, who would not adhere to the way that they wanted things done because it was not in the, quote, best interest of baseball. When they decided to fire Fay Vincent and put a puppet, I think, Bud Selig, the owner of the Milwaukee Brewers, in the position of commissioner of baseball, and still to this day pretend that he is the commissioner of baseball. They have done nothing but go back to the days of the National Commission prior to the 1919 World Series. The only difference is that baseball players now are able to not get the brunt of that because of free agency and everything else. They're still going to make a gazillion dollars. But it just shows you the amounts of money and the greed at the ownership level from the very early days of the game, to know the billions of dollars that are involved now, to where you can pay a guy $26 million for one season of baseball. It's ludicrous. But it's only ludicrous when you consider, well, he shouldn't be making as much as this school teacher over here. But there's only this much money in the school district, and there's billions over here, and this ball player is creating those billions. Why shouldn't he get his $26 million? Christy Matthewson probably would have felt that way, that a ball player should get what he is worth, at the same time realizing that the numbers were ludicrous for real life and what really means something in life. But as far as what I want people to get out of it, it really just kind of comes down to, I end the show with his final advice to the boys of the country. And the show just finishes off with that it's not easy. Give friends the names that they can live up to. Throw your best pitch in a pinch. Be humble, gentle, and kind. But to remember, if you're able to touch just one life in a positive manner, that you have succeeded in your own. So that's what I want people to take away as they leave the theater. It's just like, you know what? It doesn't take much to be a success in this life. In this life. And that even, even feeling the worst on your worst day, the biggest dump that you've ever been in ever, to the point where it's hopeless, everything is bad, everything, you're never going to dig yourself out of whatever the problem is, that if you've able to just, make one person's day better ever, then you're a success. And it's not, all that other stuff can just go away.
Where can people find out more information about the MATTY show?
I've got a pretty good website that's kind of fun and shows you a lot of old video, which is kind of a hoot, too, at matty.org, www.matty.org. And you can pretty much find out anything there, and if you click on the email links, you can send a note directly to me, and I promise I'll write back. Just put Robotech or something in the subject line so I know it's you.
We want to thank Eddie Frierson for spending the afternoon talking to us about movies, acting, and baseball.
Hey, my pleasure, guys, really.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the RoboTalk podcast. Please consider supporting us at patreon.com/RoboTalk to help us constantly improve the show and bring in more exciting guests. Until then, thank you for watching and listening. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.